I used to work in that world as well. So I know a little bit about how those two worlds can collide at times. And then, of course, vocational rehabilitation. That's where I'm at now. So I've got, a dabble in IDD and disabilities, just the whole gamut of things. And it started pretty early on in my life. My parents actually were in that career as well. So here I am, passed on the torch and still going. And hopefully my kids will just do the same thing too, because this is a hard world to navigate through enough. So thank you guys for having us. Well, I say us. Sarah Kendall had to switch up last minute. So that's why I'm here. Otherwise, we would have both been here. But Sarah Kendall had to switch up last minute. She is my counterpart over in the VR agency with Texas Workforce. And we essentially do the exact same thing. We're both certified by Social Security as benefits counselors. And that just is a fancy way of saying that we know a little lot about Social Security benefits and working, and that it is possible to have Social Security benefits and go to work. A lot of you may have heard the myth that it's not true. You can't work and maintain benefits. But I'm here to tell you that you can. Ironically enough, I'm sure you guys have ran into this before, where you contact the Social Security office and they either tell you a whole bunch of nothing or a whole bunch of wrong information, and then you're just left in the dark about why did I even call Social Security in the first place? Well, you would think they would be the right people to call when you have a question concerning Social Security benefits. But when it comes to the disability benefits, they don't know. They don't know. They actually certify people like myself and my counterpart, Sarah Kendall, to know about these programs. So internally within the Social Security system itself, you're not going to really find anybody that knows about Social Security benefits, the disability benefits, and working. So that's why I'm here, to help you guys understand a little bit about how this system works. And I am okay if you do stop me to ask questions. I'm comfortable with that. I'm used to that because I don't want you to leave with saying, oh my gosh, I meant to ask this. So if a question comes up, and you can type it in the chat, or you can just yell and stop me. I am used to that. I also have a old teacher hat on from years ago. So if you speak out of turn, it's fine. I think there's a raise your hand feature on here as well. If you want to use that, feel free to do it. But
God, shut up.
You can stop me in the middle of it. See, look, I'm already bored with Carly. I'm sorry. Well, Social Security benefits is boring. I'm going to tell you.
I'm sorry, not talking to you, not talking to you.
It's okay, Carly. I understand. I try to make Social Security benefits fun, but it's not. Well, let's jump in, okay? And I said, I'm going to try to make it fun. I'm going to try to make it fun, and I'm going to try to do this within, I think, do we have an hour? All right, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best, okay? I'm going to do my best to get this in an hour and to save time for questions. That's another reason I said, if you need to stop me to ask a question, feel free to do that. So let's jump into how often have you heard? We like starting off with this because how often have you heard these things? How often have you heard, if I go to work, I'll lose my benefit. I can only make a certain amount each month, or only work a certain number of hours, or I will lose my benefits. I must keep $1 of SSI, or I lose Medicaid, or my home and community-based waiver spots, such as like Medicaid, or such as CLAS or HCS or Texas Home Living. If I go to work, Social Security will send me a letter asking for a lot of money back. So what we're going to navigate through tonight is busting 1 through 3. Those are myths, believe it or not. Those first 3 things are not true. Not true. And for those of you that may have heard this for the very first time, that that's not true, I am certified and here to tell you that, in fact, Those three things are not true. So if you've ever heard those three things, throw it out your head. Those folks did not know what they were talking about. Okay. Now, the last one, it's a guarantee thing. Those are what we call overpayments. And overpayments can be quite a headache to deal with. So as we navigate through the presentation today or tonight, we're going to help give you some tools on how to handle those overpayments. So let's start with some basic terminology when it comes to the Social Security world. When people say or ask, well, do you get Social Security? Literally asking the most empty question ever. Social Security is an administration. They happen to have a very big building down there in Washington. Actually, there's one in Dallas. You know, we've got our big regional offices. But when somebody says they get Social Security, they're not saying anything. Maybe they're saying that they get a brick in the mail from the building, but saying that you get Social Security or asking if you get Social Security is an empty question. Now, when you ask, well, do you receive supplemental security income, SSI, right? Now we're getting down to saying what program you're on. Because as benefits counselors, we know that when someone's on SSI, there's a certain set of rules that have to be followed under Title 16 SSI. SGA, substantial gainful activity. Substantial gainful activity is something that Social Security does take a look at, not necessarily on the SSI side or on SSI Title 16, but it's on one of the other programs. We're not going to touch in on that program tonight. That's known as Title II. But if you've got questions about Title II benefits, such as maybe you have a child who's a childhood disability beneficiary or disabled adult child, those fall under Title II benefits. Tonight, what we're going to focus on is Title 16 SSI only, okay? But if you do have some questions about Title II benefits, please reach out to me. So the two disability programs, I just mentioned them. One is Title II. The one we're going to focus on tonight is Title 16 SSI. There's three categories within Title 16. You've got childhood SSI, okay, that's from ages 0 to 18, and then adult SSI. A lot of the cases that we deal with, on the VRN involve adult SSI. But for you, most of you, I think, are parents, I would assume. The magic number in the Social Security world that makes you an adult is 18. 18 is the magic number in Social Security world that says you are now an adult on your own record, okay? But before that, it's considered childhood SSI. And then there's another category called SSI aged, and this is for folks who are 65 and older, and that last one is actually not related to having a disability. It's not considered a disability benefit. It is simply a retirement benefit of sorts that maybe there's somebody who's over 65, they haven't paid enough into the system to draw retirement on their own, and they're on a needs base where they cannot pay for their own food and shelter. So then they would fall into the SSI age category, okay? So one thing we've got to get straight. SSI is not given because you have a disability. It's not what it is. It is a needs-based program that helps with two things: food and shelter. That's it. And it's built in the title, right? Supplemental. And I hear the word supplemental, I don't think all of my needs It is literally to help with food and shelter. That is what it was designed for. And it has very little to do with having a disability. Very little with having a disability. It has to do with your ability to work and earn substantial, gainful work. That's what SSI is for. If you do not have the ability, right? If your disability is interfering with the ability to make substantial, gainful work, then that's when they start diving into the eligibility criteria to receive SSI. The disability piece is pretty minor on the sequential evaluation that all applications go through when it comes to SSI. Now, childhood SSI is awarded when a parent's income is not adequate. So in the Social Security world itself, Social Security is pretty old school in the way of thinking. So when I say that, I mean in Social Security's eyes, you as a parent, they say you are responsible as a parent to provide for your child. If your income is not adequate enough to do that, your child can receive some SSI, hence the childhood SSI. Now, if you get in a situation as you start, maybe as a parent, you start working, you start earning more and more, and we'll touch on this a little bit about deeming, your income can be deemed to your child. And we'll touch on that a little bit more a few slides down. But if a child under 18 is earning under that substantial gainful activity at the time of their application, okay, they're going to be denied for SSI. Because again, I want everybody to remember and keep in their head, SSI is a needs-based program. Needs-based for two things, food and shelter. So, substantial gainful activity, it's really only important when applying for adult SSI. It doesn't have anything to do with the work activity on the SSI at all. So a lot of people hear that word substantial gainful activity like thrown around and think it's like this really big thing. On the SSI side, that's not what they're looking at. They are looking at, one, your ability to earn income to support those two things, food and shelter. Okay. So, childhood SSI versus adult SSI. In basic terms, okay, the eligibility for childhood SSI looks at functional limitations for someone who's under 18, who's at home and in school, in comparison to children of the same age who don't have a disability. And then adult SSI is looking at whether the disability impacts that ability to, like I said, earn SGA in an employment situation. Because between 18 and 64, right, for most of us, that is working age. So things are looked at differently in adult SSI versus the childhood SSI. So for example, a youth with a mild learning disability, they may qualify for childhood SSI, but not adult SSI. Because if they still have the ability, even with a mild learning disability, if they still have the ability to go to work and earn and support themselves where their food and shelter, they may get denied. For example, a lot of times parents will apply because maybe their child is on the spectrum. And then they'll come to us and be like, well, why were they denied? Autism is not always, depending on what scale of the spectrum a person is on, it may not meet the definition of having a disability in Social Security's eyes. One thing to also remember when it comes to Social Security determining someone eligible based on their disability is Social Security has some of these, it's very strict. Their definition of having a disability is actually one of the most strict in the nation. Now, with that said, it is important when you are applying, if you already haven't or if you're going down that road, you need to make sure to have all documentation that is needed when you do submit the application. You don't want to leave anything out. So individuals are not automatically eligible, okay? They actually go through a determination process when they turn 18, an eligibility process. The process that all applications go through for ages 18 and up it's called the sequential evaluation. And it's 5 thorough steps. And so essentially, when people come to us and say, well, it's just not fair how Social Security does it, I'm here to tell you that the applications go through the same process, the same process. And so in a sense, it is to keep it fair. And what usually happens is maybe some documentation is missing, or it doesn't meet the strict definition of having a disability in Social Security world. Individuals transitioning from childhood to adult SSI, they can be proactive as they're approaching age 18 and go ahead and start the application process to not have to wait until they turn 18 and then start. They can start the application as they're approaching 18. Deeming, I mentioned this a few slides before. So SSI deeming relationships. The easiest way to explain this is, again, Social Security in their eyes, these are the relationships where there's a responsibility to take care of the other person. Hence, parent to child, minor child, so anyone under 18, spouse to spouse, or sponsor to immigrant. So what that means is any income, okay, that's to help take care of a minor child under 18 or a spouse or an immigrant who's trying to receive or is receiving SSI, the income from their parent, from their spouse, or from their sponsor can be deemed and could impact their SSI. So childhood SSI into adult SSI. So 18 is that magic number, like I said. So when 18 happens in the Social Security world, you literally become an adult on your own. And I know as parents hearing the age 18, we're like, that is not an adult. In Social Security world, it is. It is an adult. Deeming no longer applies when someone turns 18. However, if someone is not paying for their food and shelter on their own, like if they're receiving help from someone, that is what Social Security labels as in-kind support and maintenance. And what happens basically is the federal benefit rate, the starting rate of their SSI immediately drops down to $560.67 for this year. And that is if an individual is not helping to pay for their food and shelter, their room and board. Now, the in-kind support maintenance, it can be avoided. And a lot of parents don't know this. It can be avoided by setting up a simple rental agreement showing that they're paying for their fair share for room and board. Now, figuring out what's fair, for groceries per month and providing the information. You got the rental agreement showing how much is there and the fair share for groceries. Having that supporting documentation can help move somebody from that 560 starting point up to the full benefit rate for this year is $841, okay? Or ABLE accounts are even another good option where You can place money into that account, okay, the ABLE account, and that can help pay for room and board. But it would still help an individual get out of the in-kind support and maintenance realm on the Social Security side. Now, income and resources when it comes to SSI. So SSI needs-based program. So there's going to be some rules that have to be followed, especially in relation to income and resources. The sole purpose, and I'm going to keep focusing on this, the sole purpose for SSI is food and shelter. So if there's any other money coming in outside of that, okay, regardless of how much a person earns and regardless of the age of the individual, if there's any other money coming in relation to SSI, that's seen as unearned income, okay? And unearned and earned income can impact SSI. It will impact SSI. The resource limit when it comes to SSI, and this is a monthly resource limit, okay? This is how much you have sitting in resources month to month, $2,000 a month. If you go over that $2,000, Social Security is going to send a flag up and say, hey, something's going on here with the SSI. They're over resources this month, okay? The way that works, how that resource limit is even decided, in this rule, SSI is a needs-based program. If you have the ability to sit over $2,000 every month, why do you need SSI? That's how Social Security sees the needs-based program, to help give you guys a visual understanding of the rule and how needs-based it is. And when I say needs-based, it's really, truly a poverty program. So a lot of times we get this, well, that's my money and it's free money. No, nothing is really free, especially when it comes to Social Security disability benefits, whether it be SSI or Title II. There's a lot of work that goes into keeping up with these benefits. And when I say work, I mean the rules that have to be followed to maintain the benefits, and keeping track of earnings. And if there's an overpayment, then you've got to handle that. You got to keep up with knowing how the resources are looking month to month. But a common statement that we get a lot from parents is, this is ridiculous. It's like a full-time job keeping up with this. We know it is. But the problems in SSI and on Title II, they're never going to end. It's how they were designed. One, Social Security communications are hard. Even we have a direct line to some of the management with Social Security and offices, and we still have to wait 2 or 4 hours to talk to somebody. And we know these programs. So it's going to be a sure thing. The headaches with Social Security when you're on these programs, unfortunately, it is the nature of the beast. So I don't have any good news for you there. I wish I did, but that's probably the most bad news I'm going to give you. It's not going to get any better in the communications with Social Security. I wish I could tell you different. But one thing you guys have, you've got me as a resource now when you do run into questions about Social Security benefits. The one place I don't want you guys to go is the Social Security office, because they're just going to make you have more of a headache and just upset you even more in a situation that you may already be in. But one other note, if your child does not need SSI, or if you need help knowing if your child does, you can reach out to me and we can have an open, candid conversation. You can ask me questions, but seriously think before applying. I tell parents all the time, because one of the first questions I get, especially if they're in high school and they're in transition, I ask, one of the first questions I ask parents is, are you working? Is your husband working? Do y'all have a pretty stable income, stable home? Do y'all go on family vacations? And when I ask that question, I'm like, why are you asking me if I go on family vacation? Going on family vacations is a luxury. So you're not living in poverty. Okay? Think about applying for SSI before you just go and do it. It is truly a poverty program and it is needs-based. So let's dive into myth number one. Remember we said we were going to bust the myth, right? Individuals lose their SSI if they go to work. Not true. There's actually several work incentives to help keep the SSI cash benefit. And we're going to look at those today. Okay. Basic deductions for SSI reduce $1 for every $2 after the first $20, $65. So every month, what happens is how SSA calculates the cash benefit monthly, they actually have what's known as the SSI calculation, and that calculation is done monthly. However, you'll see a few slides from here, I'll show you what the calculation sheet looks like. There are work incentives that can be used. These are the four here: student earned income exclusion, impairment related work expense, blind work expense, and then there's the plan to achieve self-support, also known as PASS. So here we go. We're going to jump into what the SSI formula calculation looks like. All right. So we're going to take it line by line. So the first section you see here, let me see if it'll let me do a pointer. And if somebody can tell me, can y'all see that pointer? Is it showing up on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So this first section here is where unearned income is calculated and taken into factor on the SSI calculation sheet. So the first section is all about unearned income. In this particular example, there is no unearned income. Okay, so this section is zeroed out. All right. This second section is where we talk about and look at gross earned income. That is work earnings. And I want y'all to take a look. It's longer than all the other sections. Okay. And as benefits counselor, we like to show people it's longer for a reason. These work incentives are all built in here. And you're like, what? Wait, but I've always learned that if I'm on SSI, I can't go to work. Not true. Not true. You've got right there, that first one I mentioned, the student earned income exclusion. Okay. This is also a work incentive. This general income exclusion, it's just used here because there's no unearned income up top. So that's why it says if not used above. Okay. And so you can see as we go through the calculation. So this person earned $1,350 for this month. Okay. Each calculation sheet is 1 month when you see these. So $1,350 is what was earned, the gross earnings. All right. There is no student earned income exclusion, so that's 0. So you take the remainder of that, all right, which leaves us with $1,350. And since there was no unearned up top, we get to use a $20 deduction here. So subtracting $20, we're left with $1,330. Okay. And then when you go to work and you're on SSI, Social Security gives you an extra $65. So we're going to take $65 and we're left with $1,265. This impairment related work expense is another work incentive. We don't have one in this example, so that's 0. We're left with $1,265. And then we're going to divide by 2 in this section. That leaves us with $633. Oh, Another work incentive has popped up, but none applied here. So we're left with $633 in the countable earned income. That is what Social Security is going to count as countable earned income. That's what that means. So then we jump down to the third section where we literally put everything together. Okay, we put the unearned income, the countable unearned income, plus the total countable earned income of that 633. We didn't have any unearned, so that's 0. Add the 633, what we got. This plan to achieve self-support is another possible work incentive, but we don't have one in this example, so that's 0. So the total countable income is $633. So the base SSI rate for an individual receiving SSI and paying their fair share for their room and board, for an individual on their own, is $841. That is the max of SSI this year that an individual who is on their own paying their fair share can get in SSI. However, when they're going to work, okay, they've got work earnings. These are how the work earnings are factored in. The countable income that we take away from that base rate is the $633. So the SSI, that adjusted payment that comes, the check that comes to the account or comes in the mail, is going to be around $208 for this month. Okay, but in this example, what do you have? You've got work earnings plus SSI. So you can go to work and have SSI. Your SSI might go down, but somebody type in the chat for me, how much more money do you have that's your own? You worked for it. It's not even money that you got from the government. It's your own money that you earned. This stuff has to be reported though. Is this kind of sinking in? Are there any questions? Usually the SSI calculation is kind of like a whoa, wake up call. I think we have a question in the chat. Let's see. I'm a biological father. 18. Yeah, HCS is a waiver. I cannot speak on the guardianship piece unless you're talking about becoming a representative payee for him. That's different. Is that what you're referring to? Okay. If you would like to give me, or I'll have my contact information at the end, and you can feel free to call me and email me and we can discuss it more in depth. Okay. All right. All right, so here's some facts behind the SSI formula. So as an individual earns more, that cash benefit, the SSI cash benefit, is going to go down. The more money an individual earns, the more money he or she has in his or her own pocket, even after taxes. But always, every single time, regardless of the amount of earnings, okay, they're still going to have more money in their pocket and more money that they earn themselves. Myth number 2, there's no incentive for students to try to work. Actually, students have one of the best work incentives in the Social Security world and being on SSI. The absolute best, okay? The student earned income exclusion, okay? So how do you get this? Under age 22, attending school regularly. And this is the best part when it comes to the student income exclusion. The amount that can be deducted. $2,040 a month, okay, or there's a max of $8,230 a year for this year. The student earned income exclusion has got to be requested, right? No individual is considered for this work incentives, not even someone in public high school. So it's got to be requested. There's not a formal form, but you need to write a letter requesting that the student earned income exclusion be applied to someone's record who meets these criteria, the under 22 attending school regularly, and then include proof of attendance in school. So what does regularly attending school mean? Grades 7 through 12, at least 12 hours a week. College and university applies at least 8 hours a week. In a training course, 12 hours, 15 hours if there's shop practice included. And if someone has to attend less time than needed, they need a doctor's note stating that, and that would be fine. And homeschooling also does account, just needs to be meeting Texas homeschool regulations. So here's an example with that same calculation we did, okay? But we're going to do this without the SEIE, all right? So it's the same one that we just went through, okay? Now, I want you to take a look at the screen because something's gonna change. We applied the student earned income exclusion and that work incentive line. Look what happened to the SSI. It jumped up to the full benefit rate of $841. And the reason why we could use the entire amount of what was earned, it was less than, let me go back. It was less than at 2,040. That's the max that can be deducted in the student earned income exclusion. So if this student, for example, had gross earned 2,040, that's what we could deduct on that example. So this is why work incentives are important to know about. Very important to know about work incentives. Myth number 3, individuals who need services or items related to their disability to work can't lose any of their SSI cash benefits. Actually, there are work incentives that will return up to half out-of-pocket cost or more in a cash benefit. We've got the impairment-related work expense and blind work expense. So impairment-related work expense are expenses for services or items directly related to enabling an individual with a disability to remain working. An individual has to be working to get any of these work incentives. But essentially, the best way to think of what we like to call in the benefits world an IRWE, impairment-related work expense, is if you need it for life, you need it for work, okay? The services cannot be paid through any other source, right? Like, so if there's an HCS waiver, for example, that's paying for a service, or if vocational rehab is paying for something, it's got to be the individual that's paying for whatever service for it to be considered as an IRWE. But up to half the money put aside for expenses in the IRWE comes back in the form of an individual's SSI cash benefit. Here is a basic list of common IRWEs. These are not all of them. This is just a basic list. So prescription drugs, paratransit, job coaching, mileage to and from work, and a modified vehicle, durable medical equipment, assistive technology that's necessary for someone on the job, and medical services that aren't covered by Medicaid or another health insurance. So we'll do an example without an impairment-related work expense IRWE, okay? In this example, somebody's earning a little bit less gross a month, okay, but the calculation is the same. Calculation is the same. The steps are all the same. The adjusted cash benefit with these earnings is going to be $537. So that's the check that's going to post to an account or come in the mail, right? And this is, again, an example without having the IRWE. Here's an example with. So you can see we boosted it up a little bit, right? We went from $537 up to $612. We added an example of having $150 worth in IRWE. So you can see how these work incentives work to help boost up the cash benefit. It's important to explore work incentives. So The impairment-related work expense, the individual spends $150 a month for paratransit services to get to and from work. The individual's adjusted SSI cash benefit is $612, or essentially $75 more than without an IRWI, right? So, we had the $537 without, but with that $150 IRWI, it boosted up to $612, so essentially $75 more. This is $900 more without an IRWI, and paratransit costs $1,800 a month. So half the costs are covered. The blind work expense. It is much like an IRWI. In the benefits world, we call these BWIs. We love naming things in a fun way. So blind work expenses are called BWIs, and they are much like an IRWI, but way better. The first thing that you see on this list, state and federal taxes are considered a blind work expense. That is a big deal. State and federal taxes. For those who are on SSI and who are statutorily blind by SSA's definition, they should always apply for blind work expense to be added to their record, and make sure they're keeping documentation showing what they're paying for, including state and federal taxes, union dues. There's a lot of things that fall under the blind work expenses. The list is even bigger than impairment-related work expenses. So here's an example, okay? Without, this person's earning $1,600. The SSI calculation is exactly the same, steps are the same, and blind work expense is gonna fall after we divide by 2, okay? So without the blind work expense, this person would be getting $83 in SSI. Now, look what happens when we add the blind work expense. It bumps it up to almost the full amount when we add over $750 of blind work expenses. So yes, it's a lot of work to keep up with and submit documentation, but I would take $833 over $83 in a given month. Me personally, I'm sure you guys would too. Work incentives are helpful. There aren't any resources to help individuals reach self-sufficiency. There's actually a work incentive that will return all funds set aside, okay, to pay for expenses related to a vocational goal in the form of the monthly cash benefit. This is where we see the plan to achieve self-support. You can be working, but you don't have to be working when it comes to having a path. But there has to be a very specific employment goal and need items or services to begin working or maintain current employment. You gotta have earned or unearned income to create a path plan. You cannot use SSI, because again, SSI is a needs-based program, so you can't use SSI to start a path plan. You must be able to prove ability to live on the amount left after putting money into a path. Income and resources that would normally reduce the SSI cash benefit will not be counted. But the purpose of a path is to significantly reduce reliance on the cash benefit or eliminate the need for SSI. All past savings, they've got to be spent on what was approved by SSA. If you spend on anything outside of that, guaranteed overpayment is going to happen. Social Security is very strict about past plans. The past is going to be reviewed by SSA at least once a year, could be more, but it is definitely something that has to be used, an excellent tool for someone who's organized and has a strong, stable support system. And we always suggest never use paid staff to have someone monitor a path. Students and individuals saving for their own business, they can be good candidates for having a pass, or even if they're saving up for a car to get to and from work. So here's an example using the pass, all right? There's Larissa. She wants to go, she's gonna start going to cosmetology school as a nail technician, and she has a part-time job earning $800 a month. She plans to rent a booth in a beauty salon, and her costs to get started in this business are not covered by VR. It will be $1,210, and she's also saving $8,500 for a down payment on a car to get to and from work. So her parents give her $50 a month, and she's going to put that into PASS. She has $1,500 in savings to put towards PASS items, and she plans to put $100 from that, from her earnings into the PASS. So her total monthly PASS deposits are going to total out to $275. So here's the example, okay? She's got unearned income because her parents are giving her $50. That's considered unearned income. So in this example, we've got to use that $20 here. You can only use the $20 one time. So unearned income, taking the $20 right off the top in that first section, and that's the only time you can use it. You can't use it again down here in the second section. So that leaves us with a total countable earned income of $30. The gross earned income was $800 for Larissa. All right, so we go through the steps again, and notice in bold, we don't do the $20 like we did on the other example, because we already used it in that first section of the unearned income. All right, so that leaves us with $800, but she's working, so she gets that $65, the earned income exclusion. So we subtract that, left with $735. We're gonna keep going through the steps, divide by 2. We're left with $368, okay? So that's the countable earned income. So the third section, unearned income, $30, the countable earned income, $368. Add those together, and we're left with $398. That's what we're going to take away from Larissa's federal base rate of $841. And so she's left, without using her PASS, she's left with about $443 in SSI. Now, let's take a look when we add the PASS plan, the $275 that we discussed with her, okay? Going through the same steps, she's gonna put that all into the PASS, so it's not considered unearned income, okay? So we're gonna go through the steps the same way, starting in that second section, left with $358. We're going to use that PASS money that she discussed. We're going to put that $275 there. So we've got no countable unearned income, right? The countable earned income is $358 minus her PASS savings, the deduction of $275. So the countable income goes down to $83. Now, that's what we're going to take away from the base rate. It bumps her up to $758 with her putting money into a PASS. Okay, so these are how work incentives work. Here's another, this is like a work incentive. Okay, these things here. Earning income causes individuals to lose Medicaid coverage. Actually, Social Security protects Medicaid, especially when you're going to work. 1619B, okay, is a federal Social Security program that allows individuals to continue to receive Medicaid even after their SSI cash benefit has gone to zero due to earned income and until they reach the state threshold. This year, all SSI recipients in Texas can earn up to $45,355 gross annually. So when you hear those phrases of, I can only work a certain number of hours, or I can only earn a certain number amount, if those hours and that gross wage aren't reaching that $45,355, they may not be getting an SSI cash benefit, but if they're earning over $45,000 in a year, they're doing okay. They're doing okay. So the SSI will likely drop to zero, but they're making their own money, and their Medicaid is protected through 1619B. So even after an individual earns over that state threshold amount for this year, that's $45,355, they could possibly request an individualized threshold. Now, they must need Medicaid to maintain employment and cannot cover cost of Medicaid services through their earned income. Examples of costs that may qualify someone for an individualized threshold are personal attendant services and the new generation of psychotropic meds. Those two things are very expensive right now. So Medicaid buy-in is another option. If we've got somebody who's rocking and rolling through their career and they need Medicaid, they have the option to buy into Medicaid. It's a great resource for individuals who receive SSI but have exceeded that state threshold and do not qualify for an individualized threshold. The very key point to take away for the Medicaid buy-in program is that an individual has to be working to get Medicaid buy-in program, to get into the Medicaid program. Individuals who recently earned off SSI are presumptively eligible for the Medicaid buy-in and will pay a maximum of $40 per month to maintain all of their Medicaid services. Now, to do the Medicaid buy-in, it does require a very long form, and you can Google the H1200 MBI, and you'll be able to find it if you need that form. So if wages cause the cash benefit to stop, there's no way to get back on. Actually, individuals stay in eligibility status when they don't get a cash check. Again, that's where your 1619B or the individualized threshold comes on. And even if somebody does get kicked off, there's a one-page form that they can fill out called expedited reinstatement to get kicked back on. So expedited reinstatement allows those on SSI whose cash benefits were terminated due to earned income to get back on quickly. An individual has 5 years from when the month their cash benefit was terminated to request expedited reinstatement. Many on SSI who use expedited reinstatement, they end up transferring over to SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance, rather than going back on to SSI. This is a different title program. They're no longer attached to Title 16 SSI when they switch over to SSDI. They're now on Title II, and that's a whole different set of rules that we haven't touched on. Okay, we didn't go over those tonight. We're getting close to 8, and so I'm trying to hurry through. Working always results in overpayment. Your best defense on overpayment, and remember I said at the very beginning, that is the one sure thing that's going to happen. You've got to keep records and report regularly. Those who are on SSI are required to report earned and any unearned income that could impact their benefits. And they got to report by the 6th of every month, okay? Get a request in writing, a receipt from Social Security, and keep records of what you get from Social Security and what you submit to Social Security. Keep them forever. And I do mean forever. Knowing the rules the best you can, okay? Most of the time, worst case scenario, if you've got an overpayment, you can negotiate a lower monthly payment. Do not ignore the overpayment notices that come from Social Security. They're not going to go away. They will not go away. They'll just keep coming. Keep coming. And they can mess up people's credit. Yes, if it gets too bad and you keep ignoring it, they'll report it to credit bureaus. I'm working a case right now that involves a 14-year-old who's on childhood SSI, whose parents' income has been deeming to him, and they've been ignoring the overpayment notices. The child is 14 with $10,000 overpayment. He is going to have bad credit before he even knows what credit really is. It is important to know these rules. And if you don't know them, reach out to the right people, such as myself or my counterpart, okay? Overpayments under $1,000, they can be automatically waived. What you can ask for is the administrative waiver in those cases. if it's under $1,000. No matter how big that overpayment letter is, don't ignore it. Do not ignore an overpayment notice. So, role of parents in their child SSI cash benefit. If an SSI recipient is under 18 and living with mom or dad, mom and dad must report any change in their income or resources to their local Social Security office each month. Have to report. Reporting is the biggest thing, biggest rule to follow in Social Security world, reporting income. A common cause for overpayments for an adult with SSI is like that example I just told you about. The 14-year-old who's receiving SSI, their parents haven't been reporting. Social Security knows what's coming in. Okay, they know what's coming in income-wise. But remember, parent income, if a child is on SSI, a parent's income is deeming to their SSI. So overpayments in this situation that are the fault of a parent are usually not discovered until someone has turned 18 and they're left with dealing with that overpayment as an adult. Luckily, I've caught this $10,000 overpayment when this child is, 14. I'm working with the parents on what they need to do, but don't ignore it. But regardless of who is at fault for the overpayment, recovery is going to end up being the responsibility of the individual receiving the cash benefit, even when they're a minor. So how do you report? If you're the rep payee, you can go to myssa.gov. There's a rep payee section. There's also a MyRage reporting app. You can use the free app that's available on Android or iPhone. There's also an app to remind you when it's time to keep up. Keep screenshots. If you do things electronically, keep screenshots. You can also call into the MyRage reporting line. Keep a written log of your reporting. Mail to your local SSA office, attention it to Title 16 claims rep. Keep copies of everything you send in, Once the offices do open back up, they're closed right now to the public. You can actually take pay stub direct deposit to the local office and get a receipt there. But for right now, that's not an option because the SSA offices are closed to the public. If you're using any of the work incentives that we talked about, those have to be submitted by mail, or when the offices open up, do that in person. Texas Medicaid and SSI. So Texas is considered an SSA 1634 state. That means that when someone is awarded SSI, they automatically get Medicaid, okay? SSI is just one way to get Medicaid, but there's many other avenues to get Medicaid. If you want to know more about that, there's a link there. Or you can call the good old 201 line for more info on that, okay? So someone mentioned home and community-based waivers. Your child may be on an interest list for a waiver such as HCS, Texas Home Living Class, or another waiver. Your child does not need to be receiving Medicaid to get a waiver spot when their name comes up on that interest list. They can receive Medicaid by virtue of being a waiver participant. So if they come up on the waiver slot, they will have Medicaid because the waivers are a Medicaid program. So again, if you've got a child that's on the interest list, think twice about having your child apply for SSI, because they will get Medicaid if they get a waiver slot, okay? If I retire, my child loses Medicaid in their home and community-based waiver. Actually, individuals who are on SSI keep Medicaid when they become a childhood disability beneficiary through a parent's account. These are known as CDBs. They used to be called Disabled Adult Children, also known as DACs. And they're over age 18 with a disability that occurred prior to age 22 and received or did not receive SSI. mom or dad retires, passes away, or becomes disabled themselves. This particular benefit is on the Title II side. Okay, so the same side as SSDI. It's not an SSI program. This is on the Title II side. So adults over age 18 whose disability occurred before age 22, they'll draw a cash benefit from their parents and then get Medicare after 24 months of waiting, because there is a 24-month waiting period attached. Individuals who were on SSI immediately prior to become a CDB, they'll keep Medicaid regardless of the amount of their Title II cash benefit. And you'll likely get a notice saying their Medicaid was terminated. When that happens, you just need to fill out an H-1200 form and notate on there that they're CDB or DAC, and that Medicaid will get kicked back on. Individuals who are not on SSI will only receive the Title II cash benefit and Medicare. There is one exception. The dollar amount from parents' RSDI is lower than the required Title II amount. And in these cases, an individual will receive some SSI cash benefit, Medicaid, Medicare, and a Title II benefit. And we do run into those cases often. SSI and Medicaid, there's a $2,000 resource limit. This $2,000 a month in all resources, including bank accounts, stocks, savings bonds, etc. Resources are considered anything that can be converted to cash within a 20-day period, regardless of how much you might lose if you convert the resource. So personal items such as antiques, and jewelry are not counted. But most common offenses when it comes to resource limits is having multiple bank accounts with your child's name on it. That could create resource problems. Joint accounts, again, savings or treasury bonds. If there's any settlements that have been given or settled out, and inheritances. So how are you supposed to figure all this out? Well, there's some folks in Texas that can help you, and we'll go through those. Community work incentive coordinators are at the Work Incentive Planning Assistance Programs. CWICs are highly trained staff by Social Security Administration under the WIPA grant. I am actually considered a CPWIC. I went through the same training. So I am one of these people that's certified to understand benefits and work. The services are free to any customers who receive SSI and or Title II disability benefit and who are looking for work. And you can find your Texas WIPA program there at that Choose Work. If you literally Google SSA Choose Work, you'll find the webpage. The Ticket to Work helpline is a very good basic resource. Very good basic resource. They can answer questions about Social Security information and working. So they're a better resource than calling the actual local FSA office if you have basic questions about Social Security benefits. So they might not be able to go specific into your case, but they can tell you, for example, I can't remember, there was a lady I heard, she said something, Texas has a state threshold for SSI recipients. What is that? They can give you more information like that. The Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security, known as PABS, they can help provide information to individuals on a wide variety of topics related to Social Security benefits, including housing even. And they provide services by the Employment Network under Ticket to Work. And they can even help with overpayments. And the overpayments are like valid, like you can't figure it out or what happened. I've been reporting, I've been doing everything I needed to do. They can help with that. You would just need to call the Disability Rights Texas intake line at that number there and reach out to a PAB staff that way. They also have a website where you can Google disability rights and you can Google PAB. The community centers, they used to be known as our MHMRs. They do have consumer benefit specialists housed at the MHMRs. In general, they help individuals with mental health or IDD diagnosis who are receiving services through a community center And they usually help in applying and getting qualified for SSI or Title II or other HHSC benefits like your waivers. So the client must be a client of that community center, and you can find your local community center at the Texas Council link. ABLE accounts, the Achieving Better Life Experience accounts enables individuals with disabilities to save money in a tax-exempt account for qualified disability expenses. A broader array of items and services are allowable under ABLE than a special needs trust, and an individual can be their own ABLE trustee, so they can use this account. Individuals on SSI can save up to $16,000 a year for this year, and up to a maximum of $100,000 before SSA will consider that money that's in an ABLE as a resource. Individuals can join the ABLE account in any state that takes out-of-state residents. But if you want to do like a comparison to see which ABLE account program would be best, best for your child or loved one, you can go to the ABLE account, ablenrc.org link. So SSI in a nutshell, okay? SSI is determined by a formula. We walk through that. Individuals always have more money if they work under SSI. SSI Medicaid continues until earnings of $45,355 or higher each year. A little bit about VR, okay? Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehab Services. We used to be called DARS, Department of Rehabilitation Services. We're not anymore. But we assist people with disabilities to find competitive integrated employment through limited time services. So Medicaid waivers are long-term services and support. VR, vocational rehab, is short-term, not long-term support. But services can include anything the individual needs to succeed in their employment goal, including benefits planning, college, vocational occupational skills training, career planning assistance, job developers and coaches, and much more. TWS VRS offers pre-employment transition services, that's also known as pre-ETS, and those are from ages 14 to 22. The individual does not need to be a customer of VR to receive the pre-ETS services. And you can use this link here to find your local VR office, okay? Here is my contact information. I am sorry that I went 11 minutes over. So hard to get all of this information in an hour, but at least I didn't go like 15 minutes over. But if there's any questions, you can ask them now. I can stay on and answer some questions. And if you just need to reach out to me later, feel free to do that as well. I'll hand it back to our best buddies, our host.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that presentation, and no worries about going over time. This information is really important for sure. My youngest brother has autism, and the whole SSI situation was a big headache. I didn't really deal with it. My parents did, but
well, if they're still dealing with it, it's still a headache.
Question in the chat: are we expecting a copy of this presentation? Sure. Yeah, I have a copy of it. I can include it in the email that I'll send out with the recording of this presentation. So for sure. Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Nitra? No?
Is anybody's mind like blown, like, oh my gosh, I've been told the wrong thing forever? Hopefully I helped clarify some questions that you may have had rolling in your brain, like, why did SSA tell me this? It's because they don't know. It's because they don't know. Yeah. But please reach out if you guys have questions. Feel free to email me, feel free to call me. Mm-hmm. And I will get back to you with anything.
Do you have the, someone mentioned if we're going to provide a PowerPoint. Yeah, I will include it in the email that'll go out.
And I don't have it in Spanish. I'm so sorry. what I do believe, there's one thing that I can share. For example, if you guys are like a representative payee, I think Social Security has what's known as the RET Payee guide, which kind of goes through some of these things. I believe they might have that in Spanish, but I don't have my presentation in Spanish. I'm so sorry.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. So again, her contact information is on the screen. I'll also like copy and paste it in the email so you guys can reach out to her that way without having to go through the entire presentation to find it. But thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Yes, thank you guys so much for staying on and listening.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop the recording.